Supreme Commander Korvac stared grimly at the asteroid field that had once been a vibrant human civilization, utterly annihilated in the ancient war 50,000 years ago. He stood rigid on the bridge of his command ship, dark memories of the brutal conflict replaying in his mind as he surveyed the debris field through the viewport. The cold, empty void seemed to echo the remnants of a once great species, now reduced to scattered rocks and dust. Commander, scans show an unnatural structure on asteroid 72X, reported his executive officer Xylo, his mandibles clicking with excitement. It appears to be an intact human cryo chamber from before the war. Korvac's heart pounded at this startling discovery. Humanity's cryogenic technologies were thought lost to the ages, destroyed along with their empire 5 millennia ago. And yet, here one apparently still remained, entombed within lifeless rock, still powered after eons adrift. Ready a dropship, Korvac commanded, already striding towards the armory to don his combat exoskeleton. I will retrieve this chamber myself. Xylo hurried to keep pace with his commander, a note of concern in his voice. Sir, is that wise? We have no idea what's inside. It could be dangerous. Korvac's response was a low growl, silencing any further objections. Xylo knew better than to press the issue when Korvac used that tone. The Supreme Commander flexed his claws within the exoskeleton gauntlets as the dropship descended towards asteroid 72X. Anticipation and curiosity burned through his veins. If a human had somehow survived within that ancient sarcophagus, their knowledge of pre-war Earth could change the future of the Prion Empire itself. As the dropship neared the asteroid, particle beam cutters began the delicate task of extracting the cryo chamber from its rocky tomb. Korvac watched intently, his mind racing with possibilities. What secrets could this human hold? The implications weighed heavily on him as the chamber was finally freed from its prison and transferred to the command vessel's quarantine bay. The cryo chamber hissed and popped as it completed its transit from the dropship into the quarantine bay. Korvac watched through the observation window, his claws twitching with anticipation, as Chief Researcher Zolak's team swarmed over the ancient device. They scanned it from every angle, their mandibles clicking and antennae waving in a flurry of activity. Supreme Commander, this is simply incredible, Zolak said over the comm. The stasis field has held perfectly after all this time. The occupant is completely preserved. Korvac leaned closer to the window, his breath fogging the glass. What can you tell me about them? He asked. Zolak paused, the excitement in his voice dimming. Preliminary scans indicate an adult human male. But sir, I must caution against opening the chamber. There's no telling what ancient diseases he might carry. Our immune systems would be defenseless. Korvac barely heard him, his heart thundering like war drums as he stared at the cryo chamber. A living human, an enemy his species had battled so long ago, was within his grasp. I'm overriding your concerns, Korvac said, his voice leaving no room for debate. Thaw him out. Now Zolak clicked in agitation but obeyed, his team rushing to initiate the thawing sequence. Heating arrays hummed to life around the chamber. Suddenly, alarms screeched throughout the ship, jolting Korvac out of his reverie. Bridge, report, he barked into the comm. Commander, long-range sensors have picked up a massive wormhole signature, the tactical officer replied, tension lacing his voice. It's a Kotoran invasion fleet. They'll be on us in minutes, Korvac cursed viciously. The Kotoran were relentless insectoid warriors who had hounded the Prion Empire for generations. They must have detected the energy spikes from the excavation. Go to battle stations, Korvac ordered, spinning towards the bridge. But before he could leave, a sudden hiss from the quarantine bay stopped him cold. He whirled back to see the cryo chamber opening, frigid gas venting from the sides as the lid lifted. The thawing process should have taken an hour at minimum, but the human was already moving. A single pale hand emerged from the swirling mist, fingers strange and alien with too few joints, curling around the edge of the sarcophagus. The hand tensed, tendons pulling taut, and then, with impossible strength, the human began to push himself up. He rose from the cryo chamber in one smooth, fluid motion, standing tall, his body lean and muscular, clearly in peak physical condition. His eyes, a piercing blue that seemed to glow with an inner light, scanned the room calmly, taking in every detail. He wore a black battle suit that clung to his frame like a second skin, emblazoned with insignia Korvac had never seen before. "Where am I?" the human demanded in perfect Prion, his accent strange, the words slightly archaic but still understandable. "Who are you?" Korvac stepped forward, his heart's pounding. He had to force himself not to reach for his sidearm, so ingrained were his instincts to view humans as the enemy. "I am Supreme Commander Korvac of the Prion Empire," he said, his voice steady. "You are aboard my command ship. You've been in stasis for 50,000 years." The human's eyes widened in disbelief. He staggered slightly, catching himself on the edge of the cryo chamber. 50,000 years, he whispered, then straightened, his expression hardening with resolve. "Commander Andrew Evans, Earth Defense Force. What happened to the war? Where are the rest of my people?" Korvac opened his mouth to reply, but the ship suddenly bucked violently beneath them, alarms blaring as the deck shuddered, nearly throwing them off their feet. "Commander, the Katorans are firing on US." Zilo's voice crackled over the comm. Korvac snarled, turning back to the human. "We're under attack by an insectoid race called the Katorans. I must get to the bridge." I'm coming with you," Andrew interrupted, his eyes blazing with determination. "If we're in a fight, I'm not sitting it out." "Absolutely not," Zolak protested over the comm. "Supreme Commander, we have no idea what pathogens he might be carrying." The risk. Korvac waved him off, recognizing the look in Andrew's eyes. It was the same indomitable spirit that had made humans such formidable adversaries long ago, the same refusal to back down in the face of overwhelming odds. Against his better judgment, Korvac unclipped a pulse rifle from his armor and tossed it to Andrew. The human caught it smoothly, checking the charge with practiced efficiency. "Let's go," Korvac said, and they raced through the corridors, the ship shaking around them as Katoran fire pounded the shields. Crew members scrambled in every direction, hurrying to battle stations. As they ran, Korvac couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than mere coincidence. The humans' awakening, the Katoran attack, it was almost as if the universe itself had willed it. As if after 50,000 years, the ancient conflict was beginning anew, and this time, Korvac had a human fighting by his side. The bridge was a hive of frantic activity as Korvac stormed onto the command deck, Andrew close on his heels. The view screen showed the Katoran fleet bearing down on them, their ships sleek and predatory, bristling with advanced weaponry that made the Prion's vessels look like relics from a bygone era. "Status report." Korvac barked, his eyes darting over the tactical displays. "They outnumber us 3-1, Commander Zilo replied, his claws flying over the console. "And their firepower is significantly superior to ours." Korvac growled deep in his throat, the situation looking grim, but he refused to show any sign of fear or doubt in front of his crew. "Form defensive formation Delta 6, he ordered. "Concentrate all fire on the dreadnought. We need to punch a hole in their line." The crew scrambled to comply, the ship shuddering as the first volleys of Katoran fire slammed into their shields. Meanwhile, Andrew stepped up to the tactical display, his eyes narrowed as he studied the readouts with an intensity that Korvac found both unnerving and strangely familiar. "There," Andrew said suddenly, pointing to a pulsing red icon on the schematic of the Katoran dreadnought. "That's a weak point in their shields, right above the main power core." Korvac peered at the display, his mandibles twitching in skepticism. How could you possibly know that? Andrew met his gaze, and for a moment, Korvac saw a flicker of something ancient and haunted in those piercing blue eyes. "Because I fought them before," Andrew said quietly. "In my time, I know their ships, their tactics." "Trust me," Korvac hesitated, every instinct screaming at him not to put his faith in a human. But then another blast rocked the ship, sparks flying from overloaded consoles, and he realized they had no other choice. "All ships, focus fire on that weak point," Korvac roared. "Pour everything we have into it for a heartbeat." Nothing happened. Then, as the combined might of the Prion fleet converged on that single spot, the dreadnought's shields flickered and died, the Titanic vessel suddenly vulnerable. "Fire," Korvac commanded. A lance of pure energy erupted from his ship's main cannon, piercing the dreadnought's hull like a spear through flesh. For a moment, the behemoth hung in space, a gaping wound in its side, and then it exploded, consumed from within by a chain reaction of ruptured power conduits and overloading reactors. The bridge crew erupted in cheers as the dreadnought's shattered remnants spun away, but Korvac silenced them with a sharp gesture. "Press the attack," he ordered. "Target the weak points the human has identified." With Andrew calling out vulnerabilities and Korvac directing the fleet to exploit them, they began to push the Kotorans back, the tide of battle slowly turning. Hope began to surge in Korvac's hearts, and then a new wave of ships emerged from the wormhole, so massive they seemed to blot out the stars. At their center was a colossal super dreadnought, a behemoth that dwarfed any other vessel on the field. Korvac felt that hope wither and die as the monstrous ship lumbered towards them. Even with Andrew's knowledge, they were hopelessly outmatched. He turned to the human, an apology on his lips, and paused. Andrew was staring at the approaching Leviathan, but there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, a strange, almost feral gleam had appeared, his lips curling in what might have been a smile. "I think," Andrew said softly, "that it's time for round 2. Andrew's eyes gleamed with a feral intensity as he turned to Korvac, his lips curled into a grim smile, a stark contrast to the desperation that gripped the bridge. "Commander, I have a plan. It's a long shot, but it might be our only chance." Andrew said, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. Korvac met his gaze, his mandibles twitching with uncertainty. "What do you propose?" Andrew's response was immediate and unhesitating. "I need a strike team. We board that super dreadnought and take it out from the inside." Korvac recoiled at the audacity of the plan, his claws clenching instinctively. "That's suicide." Andrew shook his head, determination etched in his features. "The Kotorans won't expect it. They think we're beaten, and I know their ships. I can get us to the power core." Korvac hesitated, his instincts warring with the cold logic of Andrew's words. The human's tactical acumen had already proven invaluable, and with the Kotoran Leviathan bearing down on them, what choice did they have? "Very well," Korvac growled, his voice laced with resignation. "But I'm coming with you." He turned to Xylo, his tone brooking no argument. "Assemble our best warriors. Meet us in the shuttle bay." As they raced through the corridors, the ship shuddering under the relentless Kotoran assault, Andrew outlined his plan in rapid, precise detail. "We approach under cloak," he explained, checking his pulse rifle. "Once we're aboard, we make for the power core. I can modify their own weaponry to overload it. It should set off a chain reaction that'll rip that behemoth apart." Korvac nodded grimly, the weight of the decision settling over him like a shroud. It was a daring plan, but one that just might work. The strike team assembled in the shuttle bay, a dozen of the Prian Empire's most elite soldiers, each one steely-eyed and battle-hardened. They boarded the shuttle, Andrew taking the pilot's seat with the confidence that belied the enormity of the task ahead. As they launched, Korvac couldn't suppress a twinge of unease. Here he was, entrusting the fate of his empire to a human, a species that had once been their greatest enemy. But as he watched Andrew deftly maneuver the shuttle towards the super dreadnought, his doubts began to fade. There was something about this human, a strength and determination that inspired confidence, even in the most dire of circumstances. They docked with the Kotoran ship, the shuttle's cloak holding. With Andrew in the lead, they stormed out, pulse rifles blazing as they cut through the startled insectoid crew with ruthless efficiency. The team fought their way deeper into the ship, Andrew's intimate knowledge of Kotoran design guiding them unerringly towards the power core. But as they neared their objective, resistance intensified, Kotoran soldiers swarming from every corridor, their chitinous armor deflecting the strike team's fire. Korvac found himself back-to-back with Andrew, fighting for his life as the Kotorans pressed in with relentless force. The human was a whirlwind of motion, his rifle spitting death with every shot, each movement precise and deadly. At last they reached the power core, a pulsing mass of energy that thrummed with barely contained power. Andrew rushed to the control panel, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls as he worked to initiate the overload sequence. But just as the final steps were completed, a fresh wave of Katorans surged into the chamber, overwhelming the strike team. Korvac saw his soldiers fall one by one, their blood mingling with the ichor of the Katorans. And then, just as Andrew let out a triumphant shout signaling that his modifications were complete, a stray shot caught him in the chest. He staggered, his rifle clattering to the deck. Korvac was at his side in an instant, catching him as he fell. Andrew the human coughed, blood flecking his lips, but his eyes remained clear as they met Korvac's. "It's done," he rasped, his voice a faint whisper. "Get your team out." Go. Korvac shook his head, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm not leaving you," but even as the words left his mouth, he knew what had to be done. Andrew's hand, trembling with the last of his strength, reached out and activated the overload sequence. "You have to," he whispered, his voice fading. "Someone has to tell our story. Remember us, Korvac. Remember humanity." And with those final words, Commander Andrew Evans, the last of the Earth Defense Force, breathed his last. Korvac stared down at him, a profound sense of loss and respect welling within him. There was no time to grieve. Korvac gathered his remaining warriors and fought their way back to the shuttle, Andrew's final words echoing in his mind. They barely made it aboard before the super dreadnought exploded, a blinding flash of light that momentarily outshone the stars. The chain reaction tore through the Katoran fleet, leaving only shattered ruins in its wake. In the aftermath of the battle, as the battered Prime ships regrouped, Korvac stood on the bridge, gazing out at the starfield where the human had made his final stand. Andrew Evans had sacrificed everything to save an empire that had once sought humanity's destruction. In doing so, he had shown Korvac a glimpse of what could have been if their species had found a way to coexist. As he set a course for Prioria, to bring news of this unprecedented victory and the hero who had made it possible, Korvac vowed that Andrew's sacrifice would not be forgotten. He would ensure that the story of humanity's final, triumphant stand would be remembered for generations to come. For in that moment, the galaxy had been irrevocably changed, and so had Korvac. His perception shattered and remade by the indomitable spirit of a species that had risen from the ashes of history to leave an indelible mark on the future. As the command ship sailed through the void, Korvac found himself reflecting on the irony of it all, how the greatest enemy of his people had become their savior. The ancient war, once thought to be the defining moment of their history, now seemed a distant echo, overshadowed by the profound impact of a single human life. Korvac knew that the story of Andrew Evans would be told and retold, not just as a tale of sacrifice, but as a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. And as he gazed out into the stars, he realized that the future of the Prian Empire would forever be intertwined with the legacy of humanity, a legacy that would guide them as they faced the challenges yet to come. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. For every comment that says we will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.